The storm raged on, its wrath unleashing torrents of rain that hammered against the windows of the old ranch house. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of damp earth, and the distant rumble of thunder reverberated like a warning. The ranch boss, a man named Caleb Whitaker, stood by the window, arms crossed, eyes transfixed on the wild horses galloping through the downpour. They moved with an elegance that he found mesmerizing, their powerful bodies weaving effortlessly through the rain-soaked landscape. Caleb had always felt a deeper connection to these creatures than to any human being. Perhaps it was their untamed spirit, their raw honesty. Unlike the people he had encountered over the years, the horses didn't hide behind masks. They were unapologetically themselves, wild and free. As lighting sliced through the sky, illuminating the scene outside, Caleb felt a flicker of something he hadn't expected. Curiosity. He turned away from the window, his chest tightening. Trust was a luxury he hadn't afforded himself in a long time, especially not with people. The loss of his father had left him to run the family ranch alone, and with that, a wall had grown around his heart. He believed it was safer to keep it closed. As he paced the room, glancing repeatedly back at the stormy scene, a flicker of movement caught his eye. A figure approached through the sheets of rain. His instinct told him to remain cautious, to keep the door locked and draw the blinds. But something about the way she moved, determined yet graceful, sparked a flicker of intrigue. As she drew closer to the ranch, her outline became clearer. She looked soaked to the bone but pressed on, her shoulders squared against the elements. Caleb's heart raced, not from fear, but from a strange anticipation. He forced himself to breathe, to think rationally. What could she want? A tree branch could have fallen and she might be seeking shelter, or perhaps she had come to bother him for help. But as she approached the front porch, she didn't hesitate. She knocked on the door with authority, and Caleb felt his heart pound like a drum. He didn't want to open it. He had always kept the world at bay, and now it felt like the storm had brought it crashing back to him. Taking a moment to collect himself, he moved to the door and opened it slowly. The sound of the creaking door seemed to echo in the silence between them. The woman stood there, rain cascading down her face, her eyes bright and fierce. "I'm here to help the horses," she declared, her voice cutting through the storm like a beacon. Caleb blinked, momentarily taken aback. "Help them?" he echoed, skepticism lacing his tone. "Why would you want to do that?" "I've been tracking a herd," she explained, her voice steady despite the weather. "They're in danger, and I can't just stand by and watch them suffer. They deserve a chance." Her passion radiated from her, and for a moment Caleb found himself captivated. He stepped aside reluctantly, allowing her to enter. The warmth of the ranch contrasted sharply with the cold, wet weather outside. As she stepped in, she shook her hair, droplets flying in every direction. The sight was oddly captivating, and Caleb felt an unwelcome warmth spread through him, a feeling he had long buried beneath layers of self-imposed isolation. "So, what do you plan to do?" he asked, crossing his arms defiantly. He wasn't about to let her sway him. "The horses are wild for a reason. They don't need a human interfering." "I know they're wild," she replied, unflinching. "But the truth is they're more vulnerable than you think. They're being hunted, pushed off their land. If we don't act, they might not survive." Caleb felt a hardening in his chest. He wanted to dismiss her, to tell her she was wasting her time. But there was a flicker of something in her eyes, a determination that he rarely saw even in himself. He was intrigued, and that made him uneasy. People had a way of disappointing him, and he had learned to keep them at arm's length. "What's your name?" he finally asked, curiosity getting the better of him. "Emily," she said, extending a hand. He hesitated, but eventually shook it, feeling the warmth of her grip against his cold, rugged skin. "What exactly can you do?" he probed, trying to keep his voice steady. "You're just one person." "I have experience working with horses. I know how to approach them without scaring them off. It's about gaining their trust just as I'm trying to earn yours," she answered, her sincerity shining through the raindrops still clinging to her hair. Caleb clenched his jaw, fighting against the pull he felt towards her. He appreciated her determination, but he had long since learned that trusting people rarely ended well. "Trust isn't something you earn so easily," he murmured, more to himself than to her. "But it starts with a choice," Emily countered, tilting her head slightly as if gauging him. "We need to make a decision, and you have the power to help those horses. Think about what you want." Caleb turned away, gazing out the window at the storm. The horses were out there, vulnerable and exposed in more ways than one. Every instinct in him screamed to keep things as they were, to protect his heart by shunning the connection she offered. Yet another part of him, a part he thought he had buried, urged him to reach beyond the walls he had erected. "If you're serious about this," he finally said, turning back to her, "I'll give you a chance. But know this, I don't trust easily, and I won't hesitate to push you away if you give me a reason to." Emily smiled, a genuine warmth spreading across her face that made Caleb's heart skip a beat. "I understand. We'll take it one step at a time." As she spoke, something shifted within him. The storm outside raged on, but the tension inside the ranch began to ease just a little. The connection was fragile, but it was there, slowly unfolding like the petals of a flower. If you're enjoying this story, please consider subscribing to the channel. Caleb watched her, still wary, but inexplicably drawn to her spirit. The wild horses outside weren't the only ones in need of saving. As the rain continued to fall, both of them stood on the precipice of something new, an uncharted territory that could either heal or hurt them both. Emily stepped further into the warmth of the ranch, shaking off the remnants of rain that clung to her like a second skin. The walls felt alive with the stories of the past, the wood creaking slightly as she moved. Caleb stood near the window, arms crossed defensively as if he could physically barricade himself from the connection she was trying to forge. "I'm here to help the horses," she stated again, her determination unwavering. Caleb turned his gaze from the storm to her, skepticism lacing his features. "I know they're wild," she continued, "but they're also in danger. They can't fend for themselves against those who would harm them." Caleb's expression hardened. "Why do you care? They're just animals. You don't know what you're talking about." His voice was gruff, but Emily detected a hint of something deeper, a fear perhaps buried beneath layers of reluctance. "But I do care," she answered, meeting his gaze without flinching. "I've spent my life around horses. They have hearts and they feel just like we do. The least we can do is help them when they're in need." There was something about the way she spoke, a passion that lit up her eyes, which made Caleb's resolve momentarily falter. "What makes you think you can even get near them?" he challenged, attempting to reestablish his authority. "They don't trust humans." "I'm not just any human," she replied, an edge of defiance in her voice. "I've rescued horses before. I know how to approach them carefully. It's about patience and understanding their behavior." Her words hung in the air, thick with possibility. "Patience?" Caleb scoffed, shaking his head. "You think you can just waltz in here and change everything? You have no idea what you're up against." "Maybe not," Emily conceded. "But I know one thing for sure. They deserve a fighting chance." Her conviction was like a steady flame, illuminating the doubts that flitted behind his stern facade. As the rain began to lighten, Caleb felt an inexplicable pull toward her. The conversation was rapidly shifting. It wasn't just about the horses anymore. It was about trust, something he had learned to avoid like a thorny vine that tangled and scratched. "What's your name?" he asked, curiosity getting the better of him. "Emily," she said, her smile breaking through the tension like the sun after a storm. "And you're Caleb, right?" "Yeah," he replied, his voice softer now, though still guarded. "What do you plan to do once you find the herd?" "I've set up a safe space nearby," she explained, her eyes brightening. "I know the area well. I can lead them there, away from the hunters and the extreme weather. They'll have a place to thrive, away from danger." Caleb's heart wavered between skepticism and intrigue. "And you think they'll just follow you? Horses don't just obey anyone, you know." Emily chuckled lightly, the sound warming the chilly air. "No, they won't follow me blindly. It's about building trust. I'll have to gain their confidence, and that takes time. But it's worth the effort. Something tells me you're not going to give up easily, Caleb remarked almost admiringly. The truth was, he found her determination refreshing. The ranch had been a lonely place for too long, filled with echoes of his own insecurities. Watching her ignite a flicker of hope within him was exhilarating, yet terrifying. "Just give me a chance," Emily urged, stepping closer and lowering her voice slightly. "All I need is your support. If we work together, we can save them." Caleb felt a flicker of something he had almost forgotten, a spark of hope. "Why do you care so much? There are a million other things you could be doing." "Because animals need us," she answered simply. "They can't speak for themselves, and if I can be their voice, then that's what I'll do." The sincerity in her voice struck a chord deep within him. Caleb had long since buried his compassion under layers of anger and distrust. Her presence was like a gentle nudge against those walls. "All right," he finally said, a reluctant acceptance in his tone. "I'll let you try, but I'm not making any promises. I won't tolerate any mistakes." "Fair enough," Emily replied, her smile widening. "But I promise to give it my all." As they stood in the cozy ranch, the storm outside began to dissipate, revealing a glimmer of sunlight breaking through the clouds. Caleb felt the weight of his burdens shift slightly. This woman, with her fierce spirit and unwavering desire to help, was starting to chip away at the barriers he had so meticulously built. A sudden thought crossed his mind, one that made his chest tighten with unease. "I don't want you to get hurt," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. It was a vulnerability he wasn't used to expressing, and it surprised him. Emily's expression softened. "I appreciate that, but sometimes we have to take risks for those we care about, even if it's scary." Caleb shifted uncomfortably, feeling exposed. It was easier to maintain his distance, to stay in control. But something about her honesty resonated with a part of him that had long been dormant. "I guess sometimes you have to let go of the reins." "Exactly," she said, her eyes shining with understanding. "We only get one shot at this. We have to make it count." With their shared resolve hanging in the air, Caleb ventured a small smile. "All right, Emily, let's see what we can do together." As they stood side by side, plans forming between them, it became clear that this partnership might lead to more than just saving the horses. Maybe this was the beginning of something bigger, something that could break free from the confines of their pasts and insecurities. If you're enjoying this story, please consider subscribing to the channel. The connection was fragile, but the possibilities felt endless as they both took a step toward the unknown, ready to face whatever came next. The air in the ranch had shifted, thick with unspoken words and rising tensions. Caleb stood, arms crossed, as Emily's words echoed in his head. He had begun to lower the walls he had built around his heart, only to feel them rise again, higher and denser than ever before. The flicker of trust he had felt earlier was now clouded with doubt, and he couldn't shake the nagging feeling that allowing her close would only lead to pain. "Listen, Emily," Caleb started, his voice barely above a whisper, as he tried to steady his racing heart. "I need to know what you're planning. It's one thing to want to help these horses, but it's another to think you can just take them away without a fight." His words hung in the air, heavy with a challenge he hadn't intended to throw down. Emily took a step back, her expression shifting from determination to hurt in a matter of seconds. "I never said I wanted to take them away. I want to rescue them, Caleb. You know they're suffering out there." "It's not that simple," he snapped, the frustration bubbling to the surface. "You think you can just swoop in and save the day without understanding the risks? These horses are wild for a reason. They don't belong in some sanctuary, they belong outside with their herd." "Caleb, you're missing the point," she argued, her voice rising in defiance. "They're dying out there. They're being hunted. They need us." At that moment, the conversation took a turn that neither of them had anticipated. Caleb's heart raced not just from anger, but from fear. Fear of losing the only thing that mattered to him, the horses. A fear he had fought against for years, yet it surfaced in ways that often overwhelmed him. You don't know anything about their lives, he yelled, frustration spilling over. You're just some outsider who thinks she knows best. You want to save them, but at what cost? You don't know what it's like to truly care for them. Emily's eyes widened, the fire of her rebellion replaced with something deeper, an understanding. And you think I don't care? You think I'm just some naive girl chasing a dream? I've been where they are. Every animal I've rescued has a story just like yours. Her words struck like lightning. Caleb felt exposed, like the very foundations of his carefully constructed world were crumbling. You don't understand what I've lost, he said quietly, his voice cracking. You don't know the weight of the responsibility I carry. For a moment, silence enveloped them. The wind howled outside, echoing the storm brewing within Caleb's heart. He stood with his back to her, unwilling to let her see the vulnerability that was creeping in. You think you can just walk in here and change everything, he muttered. But you don't know what it's like to trust someone. I do know, she shot back, her voice fierce yet vulnerable. I've lost too, Caleb. I've carried that weight just like you. The difference is I won't allow fear to dictate my actions. I'm willing to take the risk, to show you that it's worth it to open up. He turned to face her, the disappointment evident in his eyes. What if I can't? What if I'm not strong enough to let anyone in? I've spent my whole life building this wall. Maybe it's time to bring it down, Emily replied softly, stepping closer again. You're not alone in this. I want to help, but you need to let me. You need to trust me, even if it scares you. Caleb felt the tide of emotions surge within him, pushing him toward a precipice he feared to cross. Trust? The word tasted bitter on his tongue, a reminder of the betrayals he had faced. How do I know you won't just leave when the going gets tough? When the horses are safe, will you just forget me? That's not how this works, she said, her voice steady and strong. I'm not going anywhere, but that's your fear talking, the fear that tells you it's easier to shut people out. Look at us. We're standing here having this conversation. We're not just fighting for the horses, Caleb. We're fighting for each other. The intensity of her gaze held him captive. He could see the sincerity in her eyes, and despite wanting to turn away, he found himself drawn closer. You really believe that? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. I do, she answered, her resolve unwavering. But it won't be easy. We'll face challenges. There will be times when we disagree. But in the end, we can't allow our fears to dictate what we do. We have a choice. The moment hung between them, heavy and charged. Caleb's instinct was to retreat, to push her away, to cling to the remnants of his isolation. Yet there was something in Emily's earnestness that pulled at him, beckoning him to lean in, to open his heart, just a crack. I don't know if I can do this, he admitted, the confession slipping from his lips before he could stop it. The tenderness in her expression deepened. You don't have to have all the answers right now. Just take one step at a time. Together, we can figure this out. A flicker of hope ignited inside Caleb. It was small, but persistent. All right, just know that I'm not one to trust easily. Emily smiled, a genuine warmth spreading across her face. Neither am I. But that's the beauty of it, Caleb. We're both learning together, and sometimes that's all that matters. As they stood there, a renewed sense of purpose blossomed between them, whispering promises of change and transformation. The weight of his past still loomed over Caleb, but with Emily beside him it felt just a little lighter. Maybe, just maybe, he could learn to trust again. If you're enjoying this story, please consider subscribing to the channel. As the storm outside began to settle, so did the storm within him, and in that fragile moment of understanding, hope began to bloom. Caleb stood in the quiet aftermath of their confrontation, the echo of Emily's passionate words still lingering in the air. The storm outside had settled, leaving behind a fresh scent of rain-soaked earth that seeped into the wooden beams of the ranch house. He leaned against the weathered wall, his heart racing as he reflected on everything that had just transpired. The weight of isolation pressed heavily upon his shoulders, and he couldn't shake the feeling that this was a turning point. He had always believed that trust was a luxury he couldn't afford, a weakness that would only expose him to pain. But Emily, in her fierce determination, had cracked open the door he'd kept firmly shut. Her sincerity was a stark contrast to the guarded world he had built around himself. Did he dare take the risk of letting someone in? With a sigh, he stepped outside, the cool evening air brushing against his skin. He walked toward the corral where the wild horses were still roaming, their silhouettes outlined against the fading light. They were free spirits, untamed and wild, much like how he had once seen himself. The horses had always been his escape from the chaos of human emotions, a refuge where he felt safe. But now, even they seemed to reflect the journey he was on, one of healing and connection. As he approached the fencing, he spotted Emily in the distance, kneeling beside a mare that had given birth to a foal just days before. She was speaking softly, her voice soothing as she stroked the mare's neck. There was something undeniably beautiful about the way she interacted with the animals. It was as though she understood them on a level he never had with any human. For a moment, Caleb stood quietly, watching her. He admired her dedication, the warmth she radiated. It was a stark reminder of what he had been missing out on by keeping his heart locked away. Slowly, he stepped closer, trying to gauge whether she would welcome his presence. "Hey," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, as he approached her. Emily looked up, her expression shifting from surprise to a soft smile. "I thought you might come out," she replied, standing up and brushing the dirt off her jeans. "I was just checking on the mare. She's doing well." "I can see that," he said, glancing at the mare and her foal who was playfully prancing around. It brought a smile to his face, a genuine one that he hadn't felt in a long time. "You know," she said, turning to him, "animals can teach us so much about trust and love. They don't judge like people do. They just exist." Caleb nodded, reflecting on her words. "Yeah, they're straightforward. You can read them easily." But the complexity of human emotions eluded him, leaving him vulnerable. "Just like these horses," Emily continued, her eyes sparkling. "You can't force them to trust you. You have to earn it. Be patient. I think the same goes for us." The weight of her gaze felt like a gentle nudge toward a realization he had been avoiding. "Patience. Right," he murmured, the truth echoing within him. She took a step closer, her expression earnest. "What I said earlier still stands, Caleb. I'm not going anywhere. But if we're going to do this, we both have to meet each other halfway." He felt the tension in his chest begin to ease as he met her gaze. "I know. I just—" He paused, gathering his thoughts. "Opening up is hard for me. Trusting people, it's not something I'm used to." "I understand," Emily replied softly. "But you don't have to do it all at once. Small steps, right? Maybe start with sharing something about your past." The idea sent a tremor through him. He had spent years hiding away memories that shaped him, the failures and losses that weighed him down. But standing there with her open and inviting, he felt a flicker of courage he hadn't known existed. "Okay," he finally said, swallowing hard. "I'll try. But you have to promise to be patient with me." "I promise," she said with a warmth that wrapped around him like a comforting blanket. They stood together in silence, sharing the moment, the connection between them slowly solidifying like the settling dust around their feet. Caleb felt a strange mix of fear and excitement as he realized he was willing to take that first step. As night approached, the stars began to twinkle overhead. He took a deep breath, the cool air filling his lungs with a sense of possibility. "When I was a kid, my mom used to say that trust is like a bridge. You have to build it one plank at a time." Emily chuckled softly, her eyes lighting up. "That's a good metaphor." It sounds like she was wise. "She was," he admitted, a bittersweet smile playing on his lips. "She taught me to care for the land and the horses. But after she passed, I felt like I had to build the bridge all on my own. I thought if I just focused on the ranch, I wouldn't feel the loss. Emily listened intently, her presence radiating understanding. And you thought shutting everyone out would help? Yeah, he said, shaking his head. I was wrong. I see that now. As they shared his story, Caleb felt the burden lifting piece by piece. Emily's compassion was disarming, and for the first time in years he felt a connection rooted in honesty and vulnerability. I want to be part of your journey, Caleb, she said earnestly. And I want to help those horses too. Together, we can make a difference. The sincerity in her voice ignited something profound in him. Perhaps it was time to embrace this journey, to take a chance on love and trust. Let's do it, he said, the resolve settling in his heart. A smile broke across Emily's face, brightening the night around them. In that moment, it felt as though they had forged a bond stronger than ever, one built on mutual understanding and shared dreams. As they stood under the vast starry sky, Caleb realized that he was no longer alone in carrying the weight of the world. Emily was right beside him, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to leave a comment about your thoughts. This was just the beginning for Caleb and Emily as they ventured into uncharted territory, together, hearts open, ready to embrace whatever life threw their way.